The armory at Forward Operating Base Atlas smelled the way every armory in every war zone smelled. Gun oil and concrete dust, and the faint metallic tang of brass casings that had rolled into corners and been forgotten. It was a smell that lived in the walls, soaked into the workbenches, settled into the fabric of every uniform that passed through those doors. A smell that Dominic Hale had carried in his lungs for 30 years. He moved through the pre-dawn darkness with the economy of motion that came from 3 decades of muscle memory. No wasted steps. No unnecessary sound. Just the quiet efficiency of a man who had walked through more combat zones than most Americans knew existed. His boots found the concrete floor the way a blind man's fingers find familiar furniture. Confident. Practiced. Automatic. Master Sergeant Dominic Hale was 55 years old. His face told that story better than any service record. Deep lines carved around eyes that had witnessed too much death in too many countries. Gray streaked through hair that had once been coal black back when he was young enough to believe that wars ended and that the men who fought them came home whole. 3 Purple Hearts hung in a shadow box in a storage unit in Virginia Beach. 2 Bronze Stars sat beside them. He never looked at them anymore. Forward Operating Base Atlas sat in the heart of Helmand Province like a clenched fist pressed against hostile earth. The Hindu Kush Mountains painted black silhouettes against a bleeding orange sky to the east. August 14th, 2011. The air already carried the promise of another 100-degree day. The heat that made you understand why this land had broken every empire foolish enough to try to hold it. His morning ritual never changed. Walk the perimeter, check the wire, visit the armory, feel the pulse of the base before the chaos of another combat day began. It was the ritual of a man who had buried too many friends who skipped their morning checks, too many brothers who got comfortable, who forgot that complacency killed more soldiers than bullets ever did. The armory building was supposed to be empty at 0445, supposed to be, but Dominic heard it before he saw it. A sound so distinctive that it stopped him 3 steps inside the doorway. The metallic click of a Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle being field stripped. Not the clumsy fumbling of a soldier doing mandatory maintenance. Not the careful but uncertain movements of someone working from a manual. This was something else entirely. This was music. Each component separated from the next with a whisper of precision machined steel. Click, slide, click. The rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Dominic had heard that sound 10,000 times across 30 years. He knew every component, every spring, every pin. He knew the difference between a man who maintained a Barrett and a man who understood one the way a surgeon understood a human body. He rounded the corner expecting to find one of his SEAL snipers putting in extra time before the day shift. What he found instead made him stop mid-stride. A woman sat at the maintenance bench. The single overhead lamp threw a cone of yellow light down onto her hands, and the disassembled rifle spread before her. Everything beyond that cone was shadow, and she sat at the center of it like she belonged there, like she had always belonged in the space between darkness and precision. She was small. That was the first thing that registered. Could not have been more than 5'3", maybe 125 pounds if you counted the desert boots. Dark brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun so tight it looked painful. Desert camouflage uniform with the sleeves rolled precisely to mid-forearm, revealing tanned, corded muscle that spoke of years of physical discipline, not the bulk of a gym, but the lean efficiency of someone who carried heavy loads over rough terrain for a living. But it was her hands that captured Dominic's attention and held it. They moved across the disassembled Barrett with the confidence he had seen maybe 5 times in his entire career. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Each component came apart and found its place on the oil-stained towel in a sequence so practiced it looked choreographed by some higher intelligence. The upper receiver, the bolt carrier group, the gas piston, the trigger assembly, laid out in perfect geometric arrangement like instruments on a surgical tray. Dominic had trained Marine Scout snipers, Army Rangers, Delta Force operators. He had personally certified 43 SEAL snipers over the course of his career, men who went on to become legends in communities that did not officially exist. He recognized mastery when he saw it the way a piano teacher recognized a prodigy the first time they touched the keys. This was not basic weapons maintenance. This was not even advanced weapons maintenance. This was the movement pattern of someone who had done this under stress, under fire, in the dark while the world burned around them and lives depended on how fast those hands could put 30 pounds of American engineering back together and send death downrange. He cleared his throat. Gentle, the way you announce yourself to someone you suspect might be dangerous if startled. The woman sensed his presence. Her hands did not falter on the rifle's components, not even a tremor. But her head turned slow, controlled the way a person moves when they are aware of everything around them at all times. Green eyes met his across the dim armory. Clear, calm, steady with the quiet certainty that came from hours behind a rifle scope controlling your breathing while the world exploded around you. She did not seem startled, did not straighten to attention, just gave a single economical nod of acknowledgement and returned to her work as if a master sergeant appearing in her workspace at 4:45 in the morning was the most ordinary thing in the world. Dominic stepped closer. The name tape on her uniform read, Holloway, Staff Sergeant rank. He mentally scrolled through the base roster the way he did every morning, matching names to faces, to capabilities, to potential liabilities. Holloway Wren, age 27, designated marksman attached to 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. On paper, she was supposed to be providing long-range fire support for infantry patrols. Standard role, standard qualifications, nothing special. Nothing that would explain those hands. Mind if I watch? He said. Command without arrogance. The voice of a man who had earned the right to be anywhere he wanted on any military base in the world. Free country, Master Sergeant. Texas accent. Slight. Almost hidden under careful enunciation the way people from small towns sometimes buried their origins when they entered professional spaces. But it was there. The flat vowels, the dropped consonants. Texas and probably rural Texas at that. Dominic pulled up a metal stool and sat. The Barrett lay spread before her like a patient on an operating table. 30 pounds of American engineering capable of punching through engine blocks at 1.5 miles. In the right hands, it could change the outcome of a battle. In the wrong hands, it was just an expensive paperweight that bruised your shoulder. She began reassembling. The bolt carrier group slid into place with a whisper of metal on metal. Perfect tolerances. Zero friction. She had cleaned this weapon so many times that she could calculate the exact amount of oil needed by touch alone. Her fingers knew the rifle the way a blind person's fingers knew Braille. Through repetition so deep it had become something closer to instinct than skill. How long have you been working with the Barrett? Dominic asked. 4 years. Her fingers installed the gas piston without looking. Her eyes stayed on the receiver, but her hands operated independently, finding components by feel, installing them by memory. Started on the M24 system in basic sniper school. Moved to the M110 in 2010. Got certified on this one about 6 months before deployment. 4 years. That tracked with her age. Probably joined at 21. Volunteered for sniper training. Graduated. Deployed. A clean linear career progression that explained everything on paper and nothing in reality. Because what Dominic was watching did not come from 4 years of standard training. What he was watching came from something deeper. Something that could not be taught in any school the United States military operated. See much action with it, he pressed. Gentle. The way you coax information from someone who has learned to keep secrets automatically and constantly. Wren's hand stilled on the rifle's receiver. Just for a heartbeat. A pause so brief that anyone else would have missed it entirely. Then they continued their mechanical dance, installing the next component with the same fluid precision. Some, she said. Quiet. Almost too quiet. Enough to know what it can do when it needs to. There it was. That tone. Dominic had heard it before from his best operators. The ones who had actually seen the elephant. Actually pulled triggers on living, breathing human beings at distances most people could not comprehend. The ones who carried the weight of those moments in their voices like stones sewn into the lining of their words. They never bragged, never boasted, never told war stories at bars, or puffed their chests at barbecues. Just that quiet acknowledgement that they had crossed a line most humans never even approached. The talkers in Dominic's experience were always the ones with the least to talk about. The quiet ones were the ones who kept him awake at night, wondering what they had seen, what they had done, what lived behind those steady eyes. Wren continued working, installing the muzzle brake with precise quarter turns, checking the scope mounts with fingertip pressure, feeling for the microscopic movement that would indicate a loose mounting screw. At these ranges, a loose scope meant the difference between a successful mission and a catastrophic failure. She knew that. He could see it in the way she double-checked every connection point, her fingers lingering an extra half-second on each interface between metal and metal. The maintenance bay door swung open, heavy boots on concrete, the sound of someone who wanted to be heard before they were seen. Corporal Bryce Whitford strutted in like he owned the place and the ground beneath it. 22 years old. Fresh-faced kid from Tulsa, Oklahoma, with exactly 7 months in country and the swagger that young soldiers wore like body armor against their own fear. Sandy hair cut high and tight. Blue eyes that had not yet learned the difference between confidence and arrogance. Morning, Holloway. Bryce's grin did not quite reach his eyes. It was the grin of a young man performing masculinity for an audience, even if the audience was just one woman and one old man. Still playing with that big gun of yours? Wren did not respond immediately. Her focus remained on installing the Barrett's barrel assembly, threading the heavy steel tube into the receiver, with the care of someone handling something sacred. Dominic watched her jaw tighten. Microscopic. A movement measured in millimeters that most people would never notice in a lifetime of looking. But Dominic had spent 3 decades reading human tells. That tiny muscle flex told him everything he needed to know. Wren Holloway was not intimidated. She was making a conscious, disciplined decision not to engage. Gotta keep it clean, Wren said. Voice flat. Neutral. Professional in the way that a sheathed blade is professional. Never know when you might need to reach out and touch someone. Bryce laughed. Sharp. Edged with something that was not quite humor and not quite hostility, but lived in the dangerous territory between them. Yeah, well, maybe next time leave the long-range work to the boys. We have got actual experience with this stuff. The maintenance bay went silent. Not the comfortable silence of people working side by side. The heavy silence that preceded violence. Dominic felt his own muscles tense. 30 years of instinct preparing for intervention. He had seen this scenario play out 100 times. The casual dismissal wrapped in buddy-buddy language. The assumption of superiority based on nothing but gender and volume. The thing that destroyed unit cohesion faster than enemy fire. The thing that got people killed in combat because trust had been eroded. One careless comment at a time. He was about to intervene when Wren looked up from her work. Experience. She repeated the word slowly, tasting it, testing its weight the way a jeweler tested gold. That is an interesting perspective, Corporal. Something in her tone made Bryce take a half step backward, an involuntary retreat that his conscious mind probably did not even register. His smile faltered. He was on uncertain ground now, and some primitive part of his brain knew it, even if his ego refused to acknowledge the signal. Wren returned to her rifle, but Dominic caught the slight smile that played at the corner of her mouth. Brief as heat lightning. The expression of someone who had proven herself 1,000 times over and did not need to prove it again. Bryce shifted his weight, uncomfortable, the swagger leaking out of his posture. Yeah, well, just saying, do not want you getting in over your head out there. Noted. Wren's hands never stopped moving. Click, click, click. The Barrett coming together like a puzzle that only she could solve. Bryce looked at Dominic. Looking for backup. Looking for male solidarity. Looking for the silent nod or the shared smirk that would tell him he was right and the woman was wrong. Dominic's face remained stone. Corporal Whitford. His voice carried the weight of 3 decades of command. How many confirmed kills do you have? Bryce straightened, pride inflating his chest. 7, Master Sergeant. 3 firefights in Sangin District. All verified by my platoon leader. Good kills. He paused. Combat is combat, Master Sergeant. Dominic nodded. Slow. The way a judge nods before delivering a verdict. Then he turned to Wren. Staff Sergeant Holloway, how many confirmed kills do you have? Wren's hand stilled on the Barrett. She looked up. Met Dominic's eyes across the workbench. Something flickered in those green irises. Reluctance. Pain. The weight of memory pressing against the inside of her skull like water behind a dam. I do not discuss numbers, Master Sergeant. Quiet. Firm. The voice of someone who had learned that the numbers meant something that could not be communicated through counting. Bryce's grin returned, triumphant. C probably has not even... She has got more confirmed kills than your entire platoon combined. Dominic cut him off, voice like a blade drawn across stone. Cold and clean and absolutely final. Now get out of my maintenance bay. Bryce's face cycled through colors. White to red to something approaching purple. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No words came. He looked at Wren. She had returned to her work, ignoring him completely. The ultimate dismissal. Not anger, not contempt. Just the absolute absence of attention, as if he had ceased to exist the moment he stopped being relevant. Bryce left. The door slammed behind him. Dominic waited until the boots faded into silence. "Why did you not shut him down yourself?" he asked. Not accusation, genuine curiosity. Wren installed the final component. The Barrett was whole again. 30 pounds of precision death, assembled with the care and reverence that a priest might give to sacred objects. She ran her hand along the barrel, checking for imperfections by touch alone. "Proving myself to people like him wastes energy I need for the work." She lifted the rifle, sighted down the barrel at an imaginary target on the far wall. Perfect cheek weld, perfect eye relief. The weapon fit her like it had been custom built for her body, for her hands, for the specific geometry of her face and shoulders and arms. Besides, she said he will figure it out eventually. Or he will not. Either way, it does not change what I can do. Dominic felt something shift in his assessment. Smart, disciplined, confident without arrogance, self-aware without self-doubt. The operator you wanted at your back when everything went sideways. "You do have a record, though," he said. Not a question, a statement. Wren set the Barrett down on the bench, gentle, reverent. "Sir, some things are classified for good reason." The words hung in the armory air between them. Before Dominic could respond, the base-wide speakers crackled to life. The watch officer's voice. Urgent. Clipped. The cadence of controlled panic that every soldier recognized and every soldier dreaded. "All personnel, this is Atlas Tactical Operations Center. We have troops in contact. Eagle 6 convoy Sangan Valley. Coordinates to follow. Multiple casualties. Requesting immediate fire support. Sniper teams to TOC immediately. This is not a drill." Wren was already moving before the last word faded. Plate carrier strapped on with practiced speed. Pre-staged ammunition grabbed from a locker that Dominic now realized she had positioned within arm's reach of her workbench. Planning. Always planning. The Barrett slung across her back with the ease of someone who had carried it through hell and back. 68 pounds of equipment on a 125-pound frame. She moved like it weighed nothing. Dominic followed her toward the Tactical Operations Center, his legs working to keep pace with a woman half his age who moved through the pre-dawn base like she had been born for this exact moment. The TOC was organized chaos. Radio operators hunched over consoles coordinating air support with clipped voices and steady hands. Intelligence officers pulling satellite imagery onto screens that glowed blue and green in the dimness. Maps covered every wall, bristling with pins and strings and the accumulated knowledge of a decade-long war. Colonel Marcus Stone stood at the central display like the captain of a warship, watching an engagement unfold. 60 years old, straight as a flagpole, silver hair cropped close. Desert Storm. The initial push into Afghanistan in 2001. The commander who had earned respect through competence, not connections. The tactical display told a story in light and color. Captain Webb's convoy. 12 vehicles strung out along a narrow valley road. Blue icons for friendlies. Red icons for enemy positions. Too many red icons. The convoy was pinned in a natural choke point, high ground on both sides. Enemy fighters pouring fire down onto American vehicles and American bodies. The radio transmission cut through the TOC's controlled murmur. 3 killed in action. 5 wounded in action. Taking effective fire from elevated ridge positions. Ranges 900 to 1,400 meters. We are pinned down. Request immediate sniper support. Stone looked up as Dominic and Wren entered. His eyes went to Wren. Skeptical. "Holloway, you are rated on the Barrett system?" Stone asked. "Yes, sir." Wren was already studying the tactical display. Not waiting for permission. Reading the battlefield the way a chess master reads a board. Her finger traced the enemy positions on the screen. "Based on the terrain and their firing positions, they are using the rock formations for cover," she said. "Standard small arms will not reach them effectively. The elevation gives them protection from direct fire weapons. To engage those positions, you need either air support or a precision rifle system capable of operating at those ranges with accuracy." Stone's eyebrows rose. That was not the response of a typical designated marksman. That was tactical analysis. Battlefield geometry. The understanding that came from lying on your belly in hostile terrain, reading the landscape through a scope, learning how terrain and distance and angle combined to create opportunities that only existed for those who knew how to see them. "We need a sniper team on that ridge in 20 minutes, Stone said. "Apache gunships are 15 minutes out, but Webb cannot wait that long. His people are dying right now." "I can be there in 15, sir." Ren's voice carried no hesitation, no false bravado, just the flat certainty of someone stating a fact about the physical world. Holloway, those are extreme range shots in combat conditions, Stone began. Dominic stepped forward. Sir, let Ghost work. The word hung in the air. Ghost. Ren glanced at Dominic. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. The beginning of a trust that would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. Stone studied Ren for a long moment. His instinct told him something that rank and gender and age could not. This woman was the real deal. Go. One word. Command and trust combined into 2 letters. Ren moved fast. Efficient. No wasted energy. Dominic fell in beside her, grabbing his spotting scope and range-finding equipment from the TOC staging area. Ghost, Ren asked as they jogged toward the motor pool. The question casual, almost amused. Call it a hunch, Dominic said. You move like a ghost. You shoot like a ghost. Might as well own it. They loaded into a Humvee. Driver already waiting. Engine running. The vehicle launched forward before the doors were fully closed, tires biting into gravel and dust. The ride took 12 minutes. Brutal terrain. The Humvee bounced over rocks and dried creek beds hard enough to rattle teeth. Ren braced the Barrett with both hands, protecting it the way a mother protects a child. Instinctive. Absolute. The rifle was more than equipment. It was an extension of her body, her will, her purpose. The Humvee screeched to a halt at the base of the ridge. Ren was out before the wheels stopped turning. She moved up the rocky slope like a mountain goat gear, and heat, and she did not slow down. Did not hesitate. Just climbed with the focused intensity of someone who understood that every second on this slope was a second that Americans were dying in the valley below. Dominic followed. His 55-year-old lungs burned. His knees protested, but pride kept him moving. He had trained too many young shooters to let one outpace him. They reached the ridge crest. Ren was already setting up. Bipod deployed, rear bag positioned. Body alignment perfect. She pulled out a small meteorological device, thumbing through readings. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. Every variable that would affect a bullet's flight path. Dominic set up his spotting scope. 60 power magnification. The valley jumped into sharp focus. He could see the convoy below. Vehicles clustered in the choke point. Bodies on the ground. Marines crouched behind Humvees returning fire with weapons that could not reach the elevated enemy positions. Muzzle flashes from the opposite ridge. Range to nearest target, Dominic called out. He triggered his laser rangefinder. 927 meters. Ren adjusted her scope. Her fingers turned the elevation and windage turrets with the precision of a safecracker. I have visual on a PKM gunner, she said. Partially concealed behind a sandbag position. 6-inch gap at chest height. Wind 4 to 6 miles per hour from the southwest. Steady. Her breathing settled into a controlled rhythm. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. Her heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed to the scope, the target, the trigger. Target confirmed hostile, Dominic said. He could see the PKM gunner through his spotting scope. The man was hammering the convoy with sustained fire. Every second that gunner stayed alive, more Americans died. You are clear to engage. Ren's finger found the trigger. First pad of the index finger. Proper placement. Perfect pressure distribution across the trigger face. She whispered something. Dominic could not hear the words. Did not need to. He had heard enough prayers before shots. Enough quiet promises made to God or fate in the half-second before a human being took another human being's life from a distance the victim would never comprehend. The Barrett spoke. The sound was enormous. A thunderclap contained in steel. The recoil drove into Ren's shoulder, and she absorbed it like the rifle, and her body were one machine designed for this single purpose. At 927 meters, the bullet took roughly 1.3 seconds to reach the target. 1.3 seconds of physics and mathematics and wind and gravity, conspiring to deliver a half-inch copper-jacketed projectile through a 6-inch gap in a sandbag wall. Dominic watched through his spotting scope. The PKM gunner's head snapped backward. The 6-inch gap. Perfect shot placement. The man dropped like someone had cut his strings. Target down, Dominic confirmed. Ren was already cycling the bolt. Ejecting spent brass. Chambering a fresh round. Her eyes never left the scope. No celebration, no acknowledgement. Just the immediate automatic transition to the next threat. Second target, 1,185 meters. Spotter moving behind a pickup truck. He is directing fire for the other positions. Confirmed, Dominic said. Moving left to right approximately 2 miles per hour. Wren led the target, calculating bullet flight time, predicting where the man would be when the round arrived nearly 2 seconds after she pulled the trigger. Distance, wind, movement speed, bullet drop. Spin drift, the Coriolis effect. The Barrett cracked again. Through the spotting scope, Dominic saw the truck's cab window explode inward. The spotter collapsed. The round had traveled through the glass through the cab and found flesh on the other side. Dominic exhaled. That is one hell of a shot. Wren did not respond. Already scanning, already hunting. Her scope sweeping the ridge for the next threat. Third target, 1,340 meters. Motorcycle. Probable commander based on the radio antenna and the way the other fighters are deferring to his position. Dominic found the target. A man on a dirt bike moving fast across broken terrain. Maybe 35 miles per hour, weaving between boulders and scrub brush. This was not just a long shot. This was a nearly impossible shot. A moving target at extreme range on unpredictable terrain. Target is moving too fast, Dominic said. Wait for him to stop. No time. Wren's voice flat. Certain. He is calling for reinforcements. I can see the radio handset. He reaches that tree line, we lose him entirely. She was calculating in real time. Distance. Target speed. Lead time. Bullet drop. Wind drift. Solving a physics problem that would challenge a ballistic computer, and she had maybe 3 seconds before the motorcycle disappeared behind a boulder formation. Wren exhaled halfway and held it. The natural respiratory pause. The moment between breaths when the human body is at its most still. She squeezed the trigger. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. It climbed. It fell. It drifted in the crosswind. It traveled for almost 2 seconds across 1,340 meters. The motorcycle was 120 feet from where it had been when Wren pulled the trigger. The round caught the rider in the upper torso. The bike went down in a spectacular crash, tumbling end over end, throwing up a cloud of brown dust that hung in the hot air like a funeral shroud. The rider did not get up. Confirmed kill, Dominic said. His voice carried a note of awe he could not quite suppress, despite 30 years of professional composure. Wren, that was a moving target at over 1,300 meters. Wren's face remained expressionless. Scanning. Hunting. Fourth target, 1,287 meters. Behind a boulder formation. Cannot get a direct shot. He is using the natural terrain as cover. Smart positioning. Dominic found the position. A Taliban fighter crouched behind a rock formation that might as well have been designed to protect him from exactly this situation. The only visible area was a few inches of shoulder. Not enough to guarantee a hit. No shot, Dominic said. Wait for him to move. Wren studied the rock face through her scope. The angle. The composition. The mineral structure of the stone itself. Her mind worked through a calculation that existed in a realm between physics and intuition. I have a shot, she said. Before Dominic could ask what she meant, the Barrett fired. Through his spotting scope, Dominic saw the impact. Not on the target, on the rock face. 6 inches to the left of the fighter's position. The .50 caliber round hit granite at supersonic speed, and the laws of physics did exactly what Wren had calculated they would do. The rock exploded. Fragments of stone and bullet jacket moving outward at velocities that turned natural material into shrapnel, as lethal as any manufactured weapon. The Taliban fighter screamed. Stumbled out from cover, clutching his face, his neck torn by stone fragments, blinded, disoriented, exposed. Wren fired again. Center mass. The fighter dropped and did not move. Dominic sat back from his scope, stunned in a way that he had not been stunned since the first time he watched a master at work. You just calculated a ricochet shot at 1,200 meters, he said, under combat stress, in real time. The angle was right, Wren said, ejecting the spent brass with mechanical calm. Granite is hard enough to fragment the round, but not dense enough to absorb all the kinetic energy. The physics made sense. The physics made sense. Dominic had trained scout snipers for 20 years. He had never seen anyone attempt a ricochet shot beyond 300 meters. The variables were too complex, the margin for error too razor thin. This woman had just done it at 4 times that distance under combat conditions. The radio crackled. Captain Webb's voice. Strained but alive. Atlas Eagle 6. All threats neutralized from elevated positions. I do not know what kind of guardian angel you sent us, but she just saved 14 lives. Request immediate medical evacuation for our wounded. Stone's voice came over Ren's radio. Ghost status report. 4 targets engaged. 4 targets eliminated. Area secure for medevac operations. Outstanding work. Return to base for debrief. The ride back was silent. Ren cleaned the Barrett in the moving Humvee. Methodical. Practiced. The same hands that had just killed 4 human beings at extraordinary range moved through the cleaning ritual with steady precision. Dominic watched those hands. No tremor, no shake. She had just ended 4 lives with 4 bullets at distances that qualified as extraordinary, even by elite standards. And her hands were rock solid. That told him 2 things. She had done this before many times more than a 27-year-old designated marksman should have had the opportunity. And she had made peace with it. Whatever psychological process soldiers went through to reconcile taking human life, Ren Holloway had completed that journey. The debriefing room felt sterile after the heat and chaos of the ridge. Air conditioning humming. Fluorescent lights buzzing. Colonel Marcus Stone sat at the head of the table. Intelligence officers flanked him. Dominic and Ren sat across from them. Stone opened a personnel file. Ren's file. Staff Sergeant Holloway. According to your official records, you are qualified expert on the M24 sniper weapons system. Completed Army Sniper School at Fort Benning with honors. Deployed to Afghanistan 7 months ago as a designated marksman for 3rd Battalion 5th Marines. Standard assignment, standard qualifications. He looked up from the file. His eyes were hard, not angry, searching. Nothing in here about Barrett qualification beyond basic certification. Nothing about the tactical analysis you demonstrated in the TOC, and certainly nothing about ricochet shots at extreme range. So I am going to ask you a question. Staff Sergeant and I expect a straight answer. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Ren sat at attention, eyes forward. Sir, my file reflects my official training history. Official. Stone caught the word. Meaning there is an unofficial history. Silence filled the room. Dominic leaned forward. Sir, with respect. I have trained Navy SEAL snipers for 20 years. What Staff Sergeant Holloway demonstrated today was not Army Sniper School technique. That was JSO sea-level work. Tier 1 operations. Stone studied Ren, reading between the lines of her service record, looking for the gaps, the unexplained periods, the sanitized sections where information had been removed so cleanly that the absence itself told a story. Staff Sergeant Holloway. Did you have a prior assignment that is not reflected in your standard personnel record? Ren's jaw tightened. The moment of decision. The calculation of how much truth to reveal. Sir, I had a temporary duty assignment. Task Force Spectre. 18 months. Classified under special access programs. The room went very quiet. Task Force Spectre. Dominic knew the name, barely. Whispered about in sealed team rooms and classified briefings. A CIA hunter-killer unit that operated in the spaces between official operations and plausible deniability. They did not conduct raids. They did not capture high-value targets. They identified specific threats and eliminated them with surgical precision from distances that made conventional military forces nervous. Spectre. Stone's voice carried new weight. Counter-sniper operations. Yes, sir. Ren's voice remained steady. Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces had been targeting coalition officers with trained marksmen, disrupting command and control through assassination. Spectre's mission was to identify and neutralize those snipers before they could operate. How many confirmed kills? Dominic asked. Ren met his eyes. Something flickered there. Reluctance. Pain. 47 confirmed kills, Master Sergeant, all at ranges exceeding 800 meters. 32 beyond 1,500 meters. 47. Dominic felt the number settle into his gut. Most career snipers would be proud of 20 confirmed kills over an entire career. Ren Holloway had 47 in 18 months, at 27 years old. Stone leaned back. What is your longest confirmed kill, Staff Sergeant? Ren was quiet for a moment, deciding whether to say the number aloud, whether to make it real. 3,247 meters, sir. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. September 23, 2008. 3 independent observers with laser rangefinders verified the distance. 2 from my unit, 1 from CIA ground branch conducting surveillance on the target. 3,247 meters, just over 2 miles. That put her within 300 meters of the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. Who was the target? Stone asked. Gentle, Ren's hands clenched in her lap. First sign of emotion she had shown since the debriefing began. Taliban sniper. Call sign the Falcon. Real name unknown. He had killed 23 Americans over 14 months. All long-range precision shots. All targeting officers and senior non-commissioned officers. He was systematically degrading our command effectiveness across 3 provinces. She paused, breathing carefully, controlling something deep inside that wanted to break free. The Falcon killed my father. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Holloway. July 12, 2008. Shot him through an armored Humvee viewport at 2,960 meters. My father bled out before medical evacuation could reach him. He died in the back of that vehicle on a dirt road in Helmand Province, and nobody could do anything to save him. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The air conditioning hummed. The world continued to function in its mechanical and different way, while Ren Holloway spoke about the worst day of her life, with the same controlled precision she brought to everything else. I am sorry for your loss, Stone said. Your father was a good Marine. Something changed in Ren's eyes. You knew him, sir. Stone nodded. Bobby Holloway trained half the scout snipers in the Corps during the 90s, including me when I was a young lieutenant who thought he knew everything about long-range shooting. He was the best instructor I ever had. Taught me that the rifle was only half the equation. The other half was knowing when to shoot and when to hold fire. Ren's eyes glistened. First tears Dominic had seen. She blinked them away. Professional, controlled, but human. If your father trained you, Stone continued, then I understand why you are this good. But I need to know something. Why is none of this in your official record? Ren looked down at her hands. Sir, after I eliminated the Falcon, I was removed from Task Force Spectre. The shot was successful. The distance was verified. The target was confirmed dead. But I had disobeyed direct orders to take it. What were your orders? Dominic asked. Capture. CIA wanted the Falcon alive for interrogation. They believed he had intelligence on foreign training programs for insurgent snipers. I was ordered to wound, not kill, to incapacitate so that ground forces could move in and secure him. Ren's voice remained steady, but Dominic heard the undercurrent, the pain, the guilt. I took the kill shot anyway. 3,247 meters, through his center mass. He died before the sound of my rifle reached him. So they kicked you out, Stone said. Not accusation, understanding. Psychological evaluation determined I was operationally compromised, revenge motivated, unable to follow orders when personal feelings were involved. They sanitized my record, reassigned me to conventional forces, as punishment and as protection. If enemy intelligence identified me as a Spectre operator, I would become a high-value target. This way, I am just another designated marksman in a regular infantry unit, invisible, buried. Dominic understood now. Ren Holloway was one of the most lethal snipers in American military history, and she had been deliberately buried? Her capabilities classified, her record scrubbed clean, all because she had chosen justice over orders in the one moment when those two things could not coexist. The debriefing ended. Stone paused at the door. Staff Sergeant Holloway, he said. You saved 14 Marines today. That buys you a conversation, but not a blank check. I need to know you can follow orders before I trust you with anything more. He left. Dominic and Ren walked out into the Afghan afternoon. 103 degrees. Heat waves shimmered off every surface, turning the base into a mirage of itself. They walked in silence toward the perimeter, away from ears and eyes. Finally, Dominic spoke. Your father made me promise something. Ren stopped walking, turned, looked at him with those green eyes that had seen too much for 27 years. The night before his last deployment, we were having drinks at the NCO club at Camp Pendleton. Bobby knew it was a dangerous assignment. Helmand Province. Sniper activity at levels we had not seen since the Soviets were there. He knew the risks better than anyone because he had spent his career teaching people about exactly those risks. Dominic paused. The memory was sharp even after 3 years. The smell of cheap beer. The sound of a jukebox playing country music. Robert Holloway's face already marked by the years, but still carrying that grin that made everyone around him feel like things would be all right. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I would watch over you. Make sure you did not let revenge consume you. Make sure you remembered that being a good sniper meant being a good person first. Ren was quiet for a long time. The wind pushed dust across the base in small spirals that rose and fell and disappeared. You did not know where I was, she said finally. After Spectre? After they buried me, you could not have found me even if you had tried. Maybe, Dominic said, but I am here now, and I intend to keep that promise whether you make it easy or hard. Ren looked at the mountains, at the endless hostile terrain that stretched to the horizon and beyond. My father used to say the best snipers were the ones nobody remembered, the ones who did the job and disappeared. No glory, no recognition, just the work. Bobby was right, Dominic said, but he would also be proud as hell of you. You know that. Ren did not answer. She turned and walked toward her quarters, the Barrett slung across her back carried on a frame that should not have been strong enough, but was. Dominic watched her go. Two warriors connected by a dead man's promise and the weight of work that most people would never know existed. The sun began its descent toward the mountains. Another Afghan day ending. Another night of uncertainty beginning. Somewhere in those mountains, other threats waited. Other snipers. Other enemies who killed from distance and disappeared like smoke on the wind. But Forward Operating Base Atlas had its own ghost now, and she was just getting started. 1,200 miles east of Forward Operating Base Atlas, in a compound carved into the mountains of the Kajaki district, a man who had been dead 3 times sat cleaning a rifle that had killed more Americans than any single weapon in the Afghan theater of operations. Sergei Kazan did not look like a monster. That was what made him dangerous. He looked like what he was, a professional, 48 years old. Lean the way desert predators are lean, stripped of everything unnecessary until only function remained. His face carried the geography of a life spent in places where softness meant death. High cheekbones from his Chechen mother. Pale blue eyes from a Russian father he had never met. A scar running along his jawline from a knife fight in Grozny in 1994 that he had won by biting through the other man's thumb. The rifle across his lap was a modified SVD Dragunov, not the mass-produced version that every insurgent with ambition could acquire. This was a custom piece. Hand-fitted barrel. Match-grade trigger. Optics manufactured in a facility outside Moscow that officially did not exist for a program that officially had never been funded by a government that officially had no involvement in training the enemies of the United States. Kazan ran an oiled cloth along the barrel with the tenderness of a man touching something he loved. And he did love it. Not the killing itself. He was not that crude. He loved the mathematics, the physics, the perfect intersection of calculation and execution that occurred when a bullet left a barrel and traveled through hostile air and found flesh at a distance that should have made the act impossible. Around him, 8 men sat in a semicircle on the dusty ground. Taliban fighters, young, eager, stupid in the way that zealots were always stupid, believing that faith could substitute for skill. Kazan had spent 3 months trying to teach them otherwise, but 3 of them showed promise. 3 of them had the patience, the stillness, the willingness to lie motionless for hours, waiting for a single moment when crosshairs aligned with destiny. He stood, walked to the firing position he had constructed on the compound's eastern wall, a shooting platform built with military precision, sandbags leveled with a spirit level, shooting mat positioned at the exact angle that optimized body mechanics. A steel target stood in the valley below, 2,800 meters distant, a silhouette the size of a man's torso at a distance that reduced it to a speck. Watch, Kazan said. His English carried the heavy consonants of Russian. Learn what patience looks like. He settled behind the Dragunov. His breathing slowed. His body became part of the earth beneath it. 1 breath, 2. On the 3rd exhale, he fired. 2,800 meters away, the steel target rang like a church bell. The students murmured. Kazan stood, brushed dust from his knees with casual indifference. Americans think technology wins wars, he said. Drones, satellites, thermal imaging, guided missiles that cost more than most of your villages. He paused. They are wrong. Patience wins wars. 1 bullet. 1 officer dead. An entire battalion loses direction. Loses confidence, loses the will to leave their bases and patrol your country. You do not need to defeat the American military. You need to make them afraid. He looked at each student in turn. Measuring. Evaluating. I have killed 63 American military personnel in this country. Not because I am stronger or braver or better equipped. Because I am more patient. Because I understand that the bullet does not care about ideology or faith or righteousness. The bullet cares about physics, and physics rewards those who wait. None of his students knew his real name. None of them knew that he had served in the Soviet Spetsnaz during the first Afghan War in the 1980s, that he had been recruited by the GRU before the Soviet Union collapsed, that his official death certificate had been filed in Moscow in 1992, allowing him to operate as a ghost in conflicts around the world for 2 decades. Chechnya, Georgia, Syria, and now again Afghanistan. Full circle. His current mission was elegant in its simplicity. Train insurgent snipers, target American leadership, create a self-sustaining program of precision violence that would continue killing Americans long after Sergei Kazan disappeared into whatever retirement looked like for a man who had been officially dead for 19 years. The Falcon had been his best student. Patient, disciplined, a natural shooter who had absorbed Kazan's teachings with hunger. Kazan had provided the Falcon with the rifle, Russian-manufactured, smuggled through Iran. He had provided the ammunition, match-grade rounds from a classified production facility. He had provided the target coordinates for Gunnery Sergeant Robert Holloway, identified by GRU analysts as a key training asset whose elimination would degrade American sniper capabilities across multiple provinces. The Falcon had made the shot. 2,960 meters. Through an armored viewport. Clean kill. Kazan had monitored the operation from a ridge 3 kilometers away, watching through a spotting scope as an American Marine bled out in the back of a Humvee on a dirt road. He had felt nothing. Professional acknowledgement that the operation had succeeded and the program was working. Then the Falcon had died. Killed by a shot at 3,247 meters. A distance that should have been impossible. Killed by, according to intelligence, Kazan had gathered a woman, an American woman who had hunted the Falcon for weeks and then reached across 2 miles of mountain air and ended him with a single round. Kazan had studied the reports, analyzed the ballistics, calculated the trajectory, and he had felt something he had not felt in decades, something that might have been respect if he were the man who allowed himself such emotions. A runner appeared at the compound gate, young, breathless, carrying a radio handset. "Commander," the boy said, "there has been an incident at the American base. Our attack was successful. They have identified the ammunition storage facility. Our rocket struck within 10 meters of the target." Kazan took the radio, listened, asked 3 precise questions, ended the transmission. The probe attack had served its purpose. Testing American defenses, identifying response times, mapping the base layout through precisely targeted strikes, information essential for the larger operation. Kandahar Airfield, the largest American military installation in southern Afghanistan. 25,000 personnel. In 72 hours, Kazan's network would strike it with coordinated precision. Truck bombs at 3 entry points. Rocket attacks from pre-positioned launch sites. And snipers. His snipers. Targeting the officers who would try to organize the defense. Conservative estimates projected 200 to 300 casualties. Enough to shake American resolve. Enough to justify the millions of rubles that Moscow had quietly funneled into his program through intermediaries so long that the money arrived smelling of nothing but Afghan dust. Kazan set down the radio, picked up his rifle, resumed cleaning. He thought about the woman who had killed the Falcon. Intelligence was scarce. An American. Military. Female. A sniper of extraordinary capability, operating in a theater where most shooters considered 1,500 meters an ambitious attempt. She had made a shot at 3,247 meters, had tracked the Falcon for weeks through terrain that would have broken most soldiers, had waited with the patience of a stone until the moment presented itself, and then had executed with the precision of a machine. Kazan respected that. He was old enough and experienced enough to respect capability regardless of its nationality or gender. In his world, there were 2 kinds of people. Those who could kill at distance and those who could not. Everything else was politics. He wondered if she would come for him, if she knew about his connection to the Falcon, if somewhere in the American intelligence apparatus someone had connected the lines between Moscow and Kajaki and a dead Marine on a dirt road in Helmand. If she was out there right now, watching, waiting, the way he would be watching and waiting if the situation were reversed. He finished cleaning the Dragunov, set it carefully against the wall, stood and walked to the window of his quarters. Through the thick glass, he could see the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. The same mountains the Soviets had tried to conquer when he was a young man in uniform. The same mountains that had buried his friends and his innocence and whatever capacity for human connection he had once possessed. Patience, he said to the empty room, and waited for noon. Back at Forward. Operating Base Atlas. Wren Holloway stood in the intelligence briefing room and studied the face of the man who had orchestrated her father's murder. The photograph filled the main display screen. Drone imagery. High altitude. The subject captured mid-stride, unaware that invisible eyes watched from 60,000 feet. Hard face. Pale eyes that looked dead even in a photograph. The scar along his jawline catching shadow. Colonel Marcus Stone stood at the head of the conference table. Intelligence officers flanked him with folders marked in red classification stamps. "This is our target," Stone said. "Intelligence designates him as Sergei Kazan, call sign the Wraith. Multiple aliases across multiple theaters of operation. Former Soviet Spetsnaz, former GRU, officially dead since 1992. Stone clicked through photographs. American bodies, officers, senior NCOs, each killed by a single long-range shot. In the last 18 months, Kazan has 63 confirmed kills of American personnel. All long-range precision shots. All targeting leadership. He is not just eliminating soldiers. He is systematically dismantling our command structure." Wren studied the photographs. The precision, the consistency, the patient, methodical approach to killing that spoke of a professional operating at the highest level. "He has also been training Taliban snipers," Stone continued. "We have identified 12 fighters who received direct instruction from him. Collectively, they have killed over 140 coalition personnel." "What is his current location?" Wren asked. "Voice level, professional." Stone zoomed the satellite imagery. A compound in the Kajaki district. Stone walls. Guard towers. Elevated terrain providing natural defensive positions. This compound serves as his base of operations. We have had surveillance on it for 3 weeks. His pattern is remarkably consistent. Every day at noon, he conducts a security walk around the perimeter, exposed for approximately 90 seconds. The only position that offers clear line of sight to the compound is here. Stone pointed to a ridge system northwest of the target. Range from that position to the compound courtyard is 3,890 meters. 3,890 meters. 2.4 miles. 643 meters farther than Wren's record shot against the Falcon. "Sir," Wren said carefully, "that is an extremely challenging distance. Even in perfect conditions, the probability of a first-round hit at that range is very low." "We know," Stone said. "We have run the ballistics, consulted with every long-range shooting expert in theater. They all say the same thing. Theoretically possible, practically impossible." He looked directly at Wren. "But you have made a shot at 3,247 meters. If anyone in this theater can make this shot, Staff Sergeant, it is you." "What is the time frame?" Wren asked. 72 hours. Intelligence indicates Kazan is planning a major coordinated attack on Kandahar airfield. Truck bombs. Rockets. Sniper teams. Casualty estimates range from 200 to 300 personnel. 200 to 300 lives. The number pressed against the inside of Wren's chest with physical force. She thought about her own father, Robert Holloway, killed by a sniper's bullet because he was in the wrong vehicle on the wrong road on the wrong day. How many other daughters would stand in empty kitchens holding folded flags? "Sir, what are the rules of engagement?" Wren kept her voice neutral. Stone exchanged glances with the intelligence officers. "That is where this gets difficult. The CIA has significant interest in this target. Kazan possesses intelligence about Russian military operations, training programs, proxy networks. Their strong preference is capture, not kill. I am giving you tactical discretion," Stone said. "Primary mission is preventing the Kandahar attack. If the tactical situation requires lethal force, you are authorized. I am not going to sacrifice American lives for an intelligence opportunity." Wren nodded. "I will need 48 hours to prepare. Practice shots at extended range. Atmospheric data collection. Wind pattern analysis." The briefing ended. Wren and Dominic walked toward the long-range shooting facility. The sun pounded down. 108 degrees. They walked in silence until they were clear of the buildings and the ears that might be listening. "There is something else you need to know," Dominic said. His voice carried a weight that made Wren stop walking. She looked at him, waiting. "I pulled strings," Dominic said. Called in favors from contacts I have maintained for 30 years. He paused, choosing words with the care of a man defusing an explosive device. Kazan did not just kill your father indirectly by training the Falcon. He was the architect of the entire operation. He identified your father as a target through GRU intelligence analysis. He provided the Falcon with the rifle Russian-manufactured smuggled through Iran. He provided the ammunition, match-grade rounds from a classified production facility. He provided the target coordinates, the patrol schedule, the vehicle identification. Your father was not a random casualty, Ren. He was a designated target in a Russian intelligence operation designed to degrade American sniper training capabilities. The world went very still. The heat, the wind, the distant sound of generators. All of it receded until there was nothing but Dominic's voice and the revelation it carried. My father was killed by Russian intelligence, Ren said, the words flat, testing them, indirectly but deliberately. Kazan ran the program. The Falcon pulled the trigger. But the bullet, the rifle, the target selection, all of it traces back to Moscow through Kazan. Ren felt rage building, hot, consuming, familiar. The same rage that had driven her to disobey orders and kill the Falcon. The same rage that had gotten her removed from Task Force Spectre. The rage that lived in the marrow of her bones and waited for moments exactly like this. Ren. Dominic's voice cut through the red haze with precision. I am telling you this because you need to know. But I am also telling you because you need to hear what comes next. She looked at him, eyes burning. You cannot let this become personal. If you take that shot at Kazan for revenge, you will miss. Anger does not steady hands. Anger does not calculate wind drift. Anger does not account for 6 seconds of bullet flight time through unstable atmospheric conditions. Your father taught you that, Ren breathed. Controlled. Pushing the rage down into a locked room deep inside her chest, where it could burn without consuming anything that mattered. I know, she said. I understand. Do you? Dominic asked. Because in 48 hours, you will be lying on a mountain with a rifle pointed at the man responsible for your father's death. And in that moment, every fiber of your being will want to kill him, not because the mission requires it, but because your heart demands it. If you cannot separate those two things, you will fail. And 200 people will die at Kandahar. Ren looked at the mountains. I hear you, she said. And you are right. Now let me go practice missing. The long-range shooting facility occupied the far edge of the base. Berms of packed earth designed to absorb rounds. Steel targets placed at graduated distances stretching to the horizon. She spent the next 6 hours shooting. Dominic spotted, called wind, confirmed impacts, took meticulous notes. Building a data profile of how the Barrett performed at distances it was never designed to reach. At 3,500 meters, Ren hit 5 of 12 shots. The misses were data points, each one teaching her how wind at different altitudes affected the bullet's path, how temperature changes altered trajectory, how microscopic variations in ammunition produced different results at extreme range. She cataloged each miss in her mind the way a scientist catalogs experimental results. Not with frustration, but with the cold clarity of someone building a database of knowledge that would be essential when the real shot came. At 3,700 meters, she hit 3 of 10. The margin for error was becoming razor thin. Dominic called adjustments after each shot. 3 feet right, 2 feet low. The numbers told a story of atmospheric conditions that changed minute to minute. Invisible rivers of air flowing between the mountains. Thermal currents rising from sun-baked stone turbulence created by terrain features that no instrument could fully predict. At 3,890 meters, her first 5 shots missed completely. Not close misses, complete misses. The rounds impacting dirt and stone in places that told her the atmospheric model she was building in her head was incomplete. That at this distance, the air between the rifle and the target contained variables she had not yet learned to account for. The 6th shot hit the edge of the target. A metallic ring that took nearly 12 seconds to reach them. Proof of concept, evidence that the impossible was merely improbable. The 7th missed. The 8th, 9th, and 10th missed. Each one a lesson. Each one a piece of the puzzle that her mind was assembling from physics and intuition and the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 hours behind a rifle scope. Ren sat back from the Barrett. Her shoulder throbbed from hours of recoil. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope in 100-degree heat. Her hands were shaking from fatigue and frustration and something that might have been fear. Take a break, Dominic said. You are forcing it, trying to muscle the physics instead of letting the physics work for you. They sat in the shade of a concrete blast wall, drinking water, letting her body recover. Tell me about your brother, Ren said. You mentioned he died in Iraq. Dominic was quiet for a long time. Mark, he said finally, 2 years younger than me. Wanted to be a Marine like his big brother. I trained him before his deployment, taught him everything I knew, told him he was ready. He paused. Standing at the edge of a cliff he had visited 1,000 times. He was ready. But ready does not mean invincible. IED in Fallujah, 2004. He was leading his fire team through a residential area. Textbook tactics. Perfect execution. The bomb was planted under a dead dog in the middle of the street. Triple-stacked artillery rounds wired to a pressure plate. When Mark stepped on it, there was not enough of him left to fill a small coffin. The words fell into the silence between them like stones dropped into deep water. You blame yourself, Ren said. Not a question. Recognition. Every day. I trained him. Told him he could handle anything Iraq threw at him. I was wrong. You gave him the best training possible. The best knowledge. You cannot control every variable in combat. Nobody can. Dominic looked at her. You sound like you are trying to convince yourself as much as me. Ren smiled. Small. Sad. Maybe. I have spent the 3 years wondering if I could have saved my father. If I had been faster through sniper school. If I'd been assigned to his area of operations. If I'd been good enough to find the Falcon before the Falcon found him. She paused. But the truth is I could not control those variables. All I could control was what I did after. How I honored his memory. How I used the skills he gave me to make sure other fathers came home. She picked up the Barrett, ran her hand along the barrel. This shot. Kazan. It is not about revenge. It is about preventing other families from living with this weight. Dominic nodded. Then let us get back to work. They resumed shooting. Ren adjusted her approach. Stopped trying to force the bullet to obey her will. Started trusting her instincts. The deep knowledge that lived in her hands and her eyes and the part of her brain shaped by years of her father's patient instruction. She stopped thinking about the distance. Started thinking about the fundamentals. Breathing. Trigger control. Follow through. Natural point of aim. At 3,890 meters, her 11th shot hit center mass on the target. Her 12th shot hit 6 inches higher, still on target. Her 13th shot hit center mass again. Dominic watched the pattern develop. You are getting it. What changed? I stopped thinking about the number. Started thinking about the bullet. What it needs from me. Where it wants to go. The distance does not matter if the fundamentals are perfect. My father used to say the bullet does not know how far it has traveled. It only knows the forces acting on it in each moment. Control the moments, and you control the outcome. They continued until darkness fell. 43 rounds at extreme range, 13 hits. A 30% success rate at a distance most snipers would never attempt. Not perfect, not certain, but possible. That night, Ren lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was not coming. She pulled out a photograph. Creased and worn from 3 years of being carried in her pocket. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Robert Holloway, standing beside a Barrett M82 at a shooting range in 29 Palms, squinting against the California sun, smiling that smile that had made her feel safe every day of her childhood, and that she had not felt since the day he died. I miss you, Dad, she whispered. I wish you were here to help me with this one, to tell me if I am being crazy or brave, to make me laugh the way you used to when I was scared and you would say that fear was just excitement with bad PR. She closed her eyes and saw him at the range, patient, methodical, adjusting her grip on the rifle stock when she was 14, teaching her to control her breathing when she was 16, telling her at 18 that she was a better natural shooter than he had ever been, and that it scared him a little because he knew what the world did to people with gifts like hers. I will make you proud, she whispered. I promise. She did not sleep. Instead, she lay in the dark and ran the shot through her mind. Over and over, calculating, adjusting, visualizing the bullet's path, feeling the trigger break, training her subconscious for a shot her conscious mind still was not certain she could make. At 0300, the base alarm shattered the darkness. Explosions. Close. The building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ren was out of her bunk and into her gear before the second rocket landed. Plate carrier, helmet, Barrett, moving on instinct. The attack lasted 15 minutes. Rockets targeting specific infrastructure, not random bombardment. Precision strikes aimed at the ammunition storage bunker, a facility whose location was not marked on any map available to anyone outside the base command structure. When it was over, Stone gathered his senior staff in a secure conference room. 2 wounded, no dead. But the implications were worse than casualties. They knew exactly where the ammunition storage was. The intelligence officer said. Not the fuel depot, not the motor pool. They went straight for a facility that requires base-level access to identify. Wren spoke first. Sir, that is insider intelligence. Someone on this base is providing targeting data to the enemy. Stone's jaw tightened. We have had 3 precision strikes in 2 weeks, each one targeting infrastructure that requires physical access to identify. Someone here is feeding them information. Do we have suspects? Dominic asked. Working it, Stone said. We have narrowed it down to personnel with access to classified facility layouts. Counterintelligence is running surveillance on 3 individuals. But this changes your mission parameters, Holloway. Your operation is now code word classified. Nobody outside this room knows the details. If there is a compromised individual on this base, we do not give them the opportunity to warn Kazan. Then the intelligence officer approached with the radio intercept. Sir, Kazan is accelerating his timeline. The Kandahar attack is planned for 24 hours from now. Not 72. 24 hours. Every cushion of time stripped away. Every margin for error eliminated. Stone turned to Wren. Can you be ready? Yes, sir, she said. I can be ready. They loaded into a Black Hawk helicopter at 1600 hours. The rotors spun up. The bird lifted into the Afghan sky and banked hard, accelerating toward the forward operating point where they would begin the long walk to the shooting position. Wren watched the base shrink below them, wondered if she would see it again. The pilots were Night Stalkers, the best helicopter crews in the world. They flew nap of the earth, hugging terrain, following valleys, using the mountains as cover. The helicopter moved through the Afghan landscape like a dragonfly following a riverbed. 40 minutes later, they touched down at Forward Operating Point Eagle, a small outpost manned by 2 squads of Marines in a location so remote that the nearest paved road was 40 kilometers away. The Marine lieutenant in charge met them, young, maybe 25, but his eyes belonged to someone much older. Master Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, we have your route plotted. 8 hours to the ridge position through rough terrain. We will have a quick reaction force standing by for emergency extraction. They departed at 1800 hours. Sunset was still 2 hours away. The light turned the mountains gold, and then amber, and then the color of dried blood as the sun dropped toward the ridgeline. The patrol route took them through some of the most hostile terrain in Helmand Province. Rocky, mountainous, valleys that channeled sound and funneled attackers, ridgelines that exposed movement to anyone with elevation and optics. Perfect ambush country. The terrain that had been killing invaders since Alexander the Great marched through and learned that conquering this land was easy, but holding it was impossible. Wren carried 68 pounds. The Barrett across her back, its weight settling into her shoulders with the familiar pressure of an old companion. Ammunition distributed through her pack and tactical vest. Water, food, medical supplies, communication equipment. Everything she needed to survive and operate for 48 hours if the mission required extended time on target. The weight was brutal. It ground into her hips with every step and turned the muscles in her thighs into burning cables. But she had carried this weight before, through mountains in Pakistan, through desert in Yemen, through training exercises in the Nevada heat that were designed to break people who thought they were unbreakable. Dominic carried 55 pounds. Spotting scope, range-finding equipment, ballistic computers, additional ammunition, communication gear. His age showed in the economy of his movement, each step placed with deliberate care, conserving energy, the way a long-distance runner conserves energy in the early miles. His knees spoke to him in a language of grinding cartilage and accumulated damage. But his mind was sharp and his eyes were clear, and the skills that mattered most, the ability to read terrain and call wind and keep a shooter focused, those did not deteriorate with age. They moved in silence. Tactical spacing, 10 meters apart, close enough to communicate with hand signals, far enough that a single ambush could not take them both. Eyes scanning the terrain as night fell and the landscape transformed from harsh clarity to the green-tinged ghost world of night vision optics. Every shadow became a potential threat. Every sound, the scrape of a boot on gravel, the distant bark of a wild dog. The clatter of a dislodged stone became a possible indicator of enemy activity. 2 hours in, they froze simultaneously. Movement ahead, a shape in the green glow of their night vision. Wren dropped to one knee, Barrett already coming off her back. Dominic went prone beside her, spotting scope up, scanning. The shape resolved itself. A wild goat, standing on a rock outcrop, staring at them with the stupid fearlessness of an animal that had never learned to be afraid of humans in the dark. They exhaled, moved on. 4 hours in, they stopped for water in a shallow depression between two ridgelines. Natural cover from observation. Wren's legs burned, her shoulders ached. The Barrett felt like it had doubled in weight since they left the outpost. "How are you holding up?" Dominic asked, his voice barely louder than breathing. "Fine." Wren drank, small sips, conserved. They had a long way to go, and water was weight, and weight was time. "Your father would be proud," Dominic said. "Making this patrol, preparing for this shot. Bobby understood the cost of this work better than anyone." Wren looked at the stars, brilliant in the unpolluted Afghan sky. Millions of them. A river of light spilling across the darkness overhead. The same stars her father had seen on his last patrol. "I hope so," she said quietly. "It is the only thing I have left to give him." They continued, hour after hour, climbing switchback trails that goats would hesitate to use, descending into dry riverbeds where soft sand swallowed their boots to the ankle, climbing again, the ridge position getting closer with each step. At one point, Dominic stumbled. His right knee buckled on a loose rock and he went down hard on one hand. Wren was beside him in 2 steps, offering an arm without a word. He took it, stood, nodded. They moved on. Neither mentioned it. They were 2 people doing a hard thing in a hard place, and the only response was to keep moving. At 03:45, they reached the ridge. Dominic set up the spotting scope while Wren assembled the Barrett. They constructed a hide position using natural terrain features. Rocks arranged to break up their silhouette. Scrub brush pulled over their position. Wren settled behind the Barrett, pulled out the rangefinder, painted the target compound with an invisible laser beam. "Range 4,087 meters, she said. 4,087, not 3,890. 200 meters farther than the intelligence had indicated. 840 meters farther than her personal record. Dominic looked at her. "I can make it," Wren said. "Not bravado, cold assessment." "But should you?" Dominic asked. "At this range, one shot might be all you get." Wren thought about Kandahar airfield. About 200 people going about their duties, unaware that in 24 hours, a coordinated assault would turn their workplace into a killing ground. "Yes," she said, "I have to." They settled in to wait. 7 hours until Kazan's noon security walk. 7 hours of lying motionless on a rocky ridge in climbing heat, watching a compound through magnified optics, preparing for a single moment when everything they were and everything they knew would be compressed into 4.5 pounds of trigger pressure and 6.4 seconds of faith. The first hour was the hardest. The body resisted stillness. Every muscle wanted to shift to adjust to find a more comfortable position on the unforgiving stone. Wren let the discomfort wash over her without responding to it, acknowledged it, cataloged it, then dismissed it the way she dismissed every distraction that stood between her and the shot. Her father had taught her that discomfort was not pain. Discomfort was the body's preference for ease. Pain was the body's warning of damage. A sniper learned to ignore the first and respect the second. By the 3rd hour, her body had surrendered. The stone beneath her had warmed to her temperature. Her muscles had found their equilibrium. The Barrett had become part of her skeleton, its weight distributed so evenly that she could not tell where her body ended and the rifle began. The sky began to lighten. The mountains emerged from darkness, gold light spilling across the peaks. Another Afghan dawn in a war that measured time in bullets and blood. Dominic asked the question one final time. "Why are you taking this shot, Wren?" "Both," she said. "Honest. I would be lying if I said Kazan's connection to my father does not matter. It does. Every time I think about him, I feel the same rage that made me kill the falcon." She drew a breath. "But if my father were lying on this ridge instead of me, he would take this shot. Not for revenge, for the mission. For the 200 people at Kandahar. I choose to do what he would have done." Dominic studied her face, searching for the poison of vengeance. He found something else. Something that looked like peace, not the absence of pain, but the quiet acceptance of a woman who had examined her own heart and found it worthy of the task ahead. Good, he said, because at this range you need to be cold, calculated, present in every moment between the trigger brake and the impact. 6.4 seconds of absolute focus. My father taught me that, Ren said, and I have never forgotten. The sun climbed. The temperature rose. Heat waves began shimmering off the distant mountains, bending light, distorting distance, adding one more variable to a shot that already had too many. Ren watched. Waited. Breathed. The compound below was waking up. Fighters moving through the courtyard. Smoke rising from cooking fires. Somewhere down there, Sergei Kazan was preparing for his noon walk. His last walk. He just did not know it yet. The sun reached its apex over the Hindu Kush and seemed to stop. Time moved differently when you were waiting to kill a man. It stretched, compressed, folded in on itself until minutes became hours and hours became heartbeats, and the only clock that mattered was the rhythm of your own breathing. Ren Holloway had been lying prone behind her Barrett M82 for 6 hours and 47 minutes. Her body had merged with the rocky ridge beneath her, hips pressed into stone, elbows anchored in shallow depressions she had carved with her knife during the first hour. She had not moved, had not shifted, had not scratched the itch that had been burning on her left ankle for the past 90 minutes. Stillness was not a skill. It was a state of being. Her father had taught her that on a November morning in West Texas, when she was 13 years old, lying in frozen grass beside him, watching a white-tailed buck through a hunting scope for 2 hours, before he whispered words she still heard in moments like this. Patience is not waiting, little Ren. Patience is knowing that the moment will come and being ready when it does. Dominic lay beside her. Eye pressed to his spotting scope. Wind steady at 12 miles per hour, Dominic said. Northwest. Temperature 92 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. Barometric pressure holding at 29.2 inches. Humidity, 38%. Ren made adjustments to her scope, measured in fractions of degrees. At 4,087 meters, that 12-mile-per-hour wind would push her bullet 34 feet to the right during its 6.4-second flight. She would have to aim at a point in empty air where nothing existed except the mathematical certainty that physics would curve a copper-jacketed projectile from where she aimed to where she needed it to arrive. She had loaded 2 rounds into the Barrett's magazine. Both were special. Brass casings she had hand-loaded in the ammunition workshop at FOB Atlas. Each one engraved with 2 letters on the base. R.H. Robert Holloway. She had been carrying these rounds since the day she learned the full truth about her father's death, saving them, waiting for the shot that earned them. 11:45. Movement in the compound. I have activity, Dominic said. Main building, door opening. Ren's heart rate increased. A small bump. Years of training engaged automatically. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Hold. Forcing her autonomic nervous system to override the adrenaline. A figure emerged from the main building. Tall, lean, moving with the economy of a trained operator. Even at 4,000 meters reduced to something barely larger than a grain of rice in her scope, Ren could see the confidence. The predator's gait of a man who had spent decades as the most dangerous thing in any environment he entered. Target acquired, Ren said. Kazan confirmed by physical profile and behavioral pattern. Dominic zoomed his spotting scope to maximum magnification. Confirmed. That is our man. Sergei Kazan walked across the courtyard with the unhurried pace of a man performing a ritual. Stopping at guard positions, inspecting weapons, testing sightlines. The muscle memory of Soviet military training still governing his body 30 years after the empire that created him ceased to exist. Ren calculated. Range 4,087 meters. Elevation 427 feet above target. Wind 12 miles per hour from northwest. Temperature 92 degrees. Humidity 38%. Barometric pressure 29.2 inches. To hit Kazan, she would need to aim 23 feet above his head and 34 feet to his left. A point in empty air. An act of pure faith in the laws of physics. Kazan continued his patrol, moving along the northern wall. Then he stopped, pulled a cigarette from his breast pocket, lit it with a match, drew the first drag deep into his lungs, and stood there, Still, a stationary target for the duration of one cigarette. Wind check, Ren said. Holding steady. 12 miles per hour northwest. Consistent across all readings for the past 30 minutes. This is as good as it gets. Ren's finger moved to the trigger. First pad of her index finger. 4.5 pounds of pressure would break the shot. Then her radio crackled. Colonel Stone's voice. Urgent. Ghost Atlas TOC. We have a situation developing. Stand by for update. Her finger froze. Standing by. We have intercepted Taliban radio traffic, Stone said. They have a prisoner. American. Staff Sergeant Connor Whitford. Captured 3 months ago during a patrol ambush in Kajaki district. Classified as missing in action, presumed dead. Ren felt something cold move through her body. Not fear. Recognition. Intelligence indicates Whitford is being held at your target location. Stone continued. Taliban forces are preparing to execute him. Today. On camera. Ghost the prisoner is at your target compound. Through her scope, Ren saw movement. Taliban fighters dragging someone from a building on the compound's eastern side. A man. Hands bound behind his back with heavy chain. Blindfolded. His body told the story of 3 months in captivity. Emaciated. Bruised. But alive. Standing on his own feet. Holding his head up despite everything. Dominic swung his spotting scope. Confirmed visual on American prisoner. He is 20 feet northwest of primary target. They are setting up a camera. Up. Ren watched through her scope as the scene arranged itself. Connor Whitford forced to his knees. The chain secured to a metal stake driven into the ground. A Taliban fighter with a video camera finding his angle. Another fighter drawing a blade that caught the noon sun. And Sergei Kazan standing 20 feet away. Smoking. Watching with the detached interest of a man observing something mildly entertaining. Stone's voice returned. Ghost, confirm you have eyes on the prisoner. Situation assessment. Sir, prisoner is in the courtyard. 20 feet northwest of primary target. Taliban fighters preparing execution. I estimate we have 60 to 90 seconds before they kill him. Can you take both shots? Stone asked. Eliminate Kazan and create an opportunity for prisoner recovery. Ren studied the geometry. At 4,087 meters, she could not take 2 separate aimed shots fast enough. The moment the first round impacted, Kazan would react. Connor would be killed immediately. One shot would save the mission or save the prisoner. Not both, unless she found a way to do both. Sir, I have a tactical solution, Ren said, but it is unconventional. Dominic looked at her. His eyes widened. Explain, Stone said. The prisoner is restrained with a steel chain, Ren said. Secured to a metal stake driven into the ground. If I can hit the chain where it connects to the stake, the impact of a .50 caliber round on hardened steel at terminal velocity will sever the connection. The fragmentation will create chaos. A window of 3 to 5 seconds where everyone in that courtyard will be focused on the explosion at the stake. And Kazan, Stone asked, second shot. 3 seconds after the first impact. While everyone is focused on the prisoner, Kazan will turn toward the commotion. Natural reaction. When he turns, I take him. Silence on the radio. Stone calculating. Dominic leaned close. His whisper carried the weight of 30 years and the love of a man who had promised a dead friend to protect this woman. Ren. That chain is a 2-inch target at 4,000 meters. Invariable wind. If you miss, Connor dies. If you hit but the chain holds, Connor dies. And if you spend your first round on the chain and miss Kazan with the second, he disappears, and Kandahar happens, and 200 people die. I know, Ren said. The ballistic computer puts the probability at less than 5%. I know. Your father would tell you to take the mission shot. Eliminate Kazan. Except that you cannot save everyone. Ren looked through her scope at Connor Whitford. A man she had never met. A man whose brother had insulted her in the armory and later become something approaching a friend. My father also taught me that the hardest part of being a sniper is not making impossible shots. It is choosing which ones to take. I am choosing this one. Stone's voice returned. Ghost, you are authorized. Both shots. Your discretion on execution. Understand that if this fails, Kazan escapes and Whitford dies. Can you live with that? Ren watched the Taliban fighter with the blade move closer to Connor. The camera was rolling. Yes, sir, Ren said. I can live with it because I tried. Execute when ready. May God guide your aim. The radio went silent. Ren settled deeper into her shooting position. Every muscle relaxed. Every thought cleared. The world contracted until nothing existed except the scope and the target, and the trigger, and the breath. 2 rounds in the magazine, both engraved with her father's initials. The first for Connor Whitford's chains, the second for Sergei Kazan's heart. One to save a life, one to take a life. Dominic called the final atmospheric reading. Wind 12 miles per hour northwest, holding steady. Temperature 93 degrees, pressure stable. Range confirmed 4,087 meters. Wren's breathing slowed to the rhythm her father had taught her in a field in Texas when the world was simple and the targets were tin cans, and the only consequence of missing was a gentle correction and the instruction to try again. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Hold. Her heart rate dropped below 50 beats per minute, then below 45. The deepest calm she had ever achieved. The place beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond doubt. The place where impossible shots lived, waiting for the shooter willing to reach far enough to find them. Through the scope, she watched the Taliban fighter raise the blade above Connor Whitford's neck. The steel caught sunlight. The camera recorded. Her crosshairs settled on empty air. 23 feet above the chain, 34 feet to the left. A point in nothing, a coordinate that existed only in mathematics and faith. Wren's finger pressed the trigger. The Barrett roared. The recoil drove into her shoulder. The muzzle blast kicked up dust around their hide position. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder. Wren stayed on scope. The bullet was already flying, 2,800 feet per second leaving the barrel, climbing on the initial trajectory, beginning the long parabolic arc through 6.4 seconds of Afghan air. 1 second, the bullet traveling, Wren's hands already moving, right hand cycling the bolt, the spent brass ejecting, her father's initials catching sunlight as the casing tumbled through the air, left hand steadying the rifle, right hand driving the bolt forward, chambering the second round. 2 seconds, the bullet still climbing, the wind beginning to push it right. Exactly as calculated. 3 seconds, the apex, the bullet reaching the highest point of its arc, hanging for an instant, then beginning to fall. Gravity reclaiming what velocity had borrowed. 4 seconds. Falling now. Accelerating downward. The wind still pushing. The air still resisting. 5 seconds. Wren's crosshairs already moving. Finding Kazan. Leading him. Calculating where he would be when the second bullet arrived. 6 seconds. Through the scope, she saw the impact. The .50 caliber round hit the chain exactly where it connected to the metal stake. 2 inches of hardened steel meeting a projectile traveling at terminal velocity. The chain did not bend. It exploded. Fragments of steel and copper and lead spraying outward. The stake shattered. Connor Whitford lurched forward, suddenly free, his body responding before his mind could process what had happened. The courtyard erupted. Taliban fighters spinning, shouting, weapons swinging in every direction, confusion rippling through their formation. Kazan turned. Wren saw it through the scope. The instinctive reaction, the turn toward the impact, the dropping of the cigarette, the reaching for the pistol, professional even in surprise, but human, still subject to the startled response that no amount of training could completely eliminate. His hand found the pistol. His arm began to rise, aiming at the escaping prisoner, a final kill before withdrawal. Wren fired. The second round left the barrel. Her father's initials engraved on brass, already traveling at 2,800 feet per second toward a man who would never hear it coming. 1 second. Connor Whitford running, hands still bound, blindfold slipping, legs churning through dust with the desperate strength of a man who had survived 3 months of hell and was not going back. 2 seconds. Taliban fighters opening fire, shooting at Connor, bullets kicking up dirt around his feet, missing in their panic. 3 seconds. Kazan's pistol coming up, steady, the only steady hand in the courtyard. 4 seconds. Connor reaching the compound wall, hands scrabbling at stone, trying to climb with bound wrists, falling, trying again. 5 seconds. Kazan's pistol aimed, finger on the trigger, sighting down the barrel at a running American who had no cover and no weapon and no chance. 6 seconds. The bullet arrived. Through the scope, Wren saw the impact. The .50 caliber round struck Sergei Kazan just left of his sternum. Center mass. The energy transfer was catastrophic. His body lifted off the ground. His feet left the earth. His arms flew outward. the pistol spinning away into the dust. His body traveled backwards 6 feet before landing in a spreading pool of red. He was dead before he hit the ground. Dead before the sound of the rifle that killed him began its 12-second journey across the mountains. "Target down," Dominic said. His voice broke on the second word. "Both shots. Both hits. Ren, you just made 2 successful shots at 4,087 meters. That is the longest confirmed kill in military history. And you did it twice in 6 seconds." Through the scope, Ren watched Connor Whitford reach the compound wall again. A Taliban fighter grabbed him from behind. Connor drove his head backward into the fighter's face. The fighter staggered. Connor broke free, found a handhold, pulled himself up with arms that should not have had the strength but did. He went over the wall and dropped to the other side. Atlas Ghost. Ren transmitted. Primary target eliminated. Prisoner escaping compound. Northeast wall. Request immediate quick reaction force for recovery. Stone's voice came back instantly. QRF launching now. Helicopters 2 minutes out. Ghost, keep eyes on that prisoner. Ren kept her scope trained on the ground beyond the compound wall. Connor Whitford appeared. Running, stumbling, falling, getting up, running again. Taliban fighters pouring out of the compound behind him, shooting, their rounds kicking up dust around a man who ran through it all with the single-minded focus of someone who understood that stopping meant dying. Then the sound arrived. The Barrett. 2 thunderclaps rolling across the mountains, a voice from an impossible distance. Then another sound, the most beautiful sound in the lexicon of American warfare. Helicopters, 2 Apache gunships screaming over the ridgeline from the east, their rotors beating the air with the sound that Taliban fighters had learned to fear. The Apaches banked hard, and their 30mm chain guns opened fire. The Taliban fighters pursuing Connor Whitford ceased to exist. A Black Hawk descended. Fast rope deploying. Marines sliding down with practiced speed. They hit the ground running. Found Connor Whitford face down in the dirt, 50 meters from the compound wall. Still alive. Still conscious. They picked him up. Carried him. Covered him with their bodies and their weapons. 60 seconds from touchdown to liftoff. The Black Hawk climbing. The Apaches providing cover with rockets that streaked into the compound and turned stone buildings into rubble and flames. Ren sat back from the Barrett. Her hands were shaking. First time in years. The full-body tremor of adrenaline releasing its grip. The physical acknowledgement that what she had just done was something the human body was not designed to do, and the human mind was not equipped to fully process. Dominic put his hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said. "Both shots. 4,087 meters. Ren looked at the spent brass beside her. 2 casings. Her father's initials stamped into the metal. R.H. Robert Holloway, catching the Afghan sun. She picked them up, held them in her palm. These casings had traveled from a ranch in Texas to a military base in Virginia to a shooting range in California to a mountain ridge in Afghanistan. "My father always said the best shots are the ones that save lives," Ren said. "Not just take them. Today I saved one directly and stopped hundreds from being taken at Kandahar." They packed their equipment, broke down the hide position, began the long patrol back to forward operating point Eagle. As they moved down from the ridge, Ren allowed herself one look back. The compound was burning. Apache rockets had done thorough work. Stone walls crumbling. The place where Sergei Kazan had built his program of death was being consumed by fire that would leave nothing but ash and charred foundations. The patrol back took 9 hours. They moved carefully. Taliban forces in the area would be angry, confused, looking for the sniper who had reached across an impossible distance and killed the most dangerous man in their organization. Every village they passed would be full of young men with rifles and a fresh reason to use them. Every ridgeline could conceal an ambush born of rage rather than strategy. But rage made fighters careless, and careless fighters made noise. And Ren and Dominic moved through the terrain the way water moves through rock, finding gaps, flowing through them, leaving no trace. They did not speak during the return patrol. There was nothing to say that the silence did not say better. They had done the thing they had come to do. They had done it in a way that neither of them had thought possible until the moment it became necessary. And now, they were walking home through darkness carrying the weight of 4 lives ended, and 1 life saved, and the knowledge that somewhere behind them, a compound was burning, and a program of death was dying with it. At one point during the descent, Ren stopped on a rocky outcrop and looked back toward the mountains one final time. The glow of the burning compound was visible even at this distance, a faint orange light against the dark ridgeline. The funeral pyre of Sergei Kazan and everything he had built. She watched it for 30 seconds. Then she turned and kept walking. They reached forward operating point Eagle at 2100 hours. The Marine lieutenant met them with hot coffee and news. Connor Whitford is in surgery at Kandahar, the lieutenant said. Doctors say he will make it. Malnourished, dehydrated, some broken bones that healed wrong during captivity, 3 cracked ribs. Signs of repeated beatings, but his vital organs are intact and his mind is clear. First thing he said when the medics got him on the helicopter was to ask them to tell his brother he was alive. His brother is on a helicopter right now going to see him. Ren wrapped her hands around the coffee cup and let the warmth soak into fingers that had been cold since the moment she pulled the trigger. She thought about Bryce Whitford, the cocky kid from Tulsa who had walked into her armory and dismissed her with a grin and a joke. The same kid who had later found her in the chow hall and apologized with the awkward sincerity of a young man learning that the world was larger and more complicated than he had been taught. He would see his brother alive tonight, would get to stand beside a hospital bed and hold a hand he thought he would never hold again, would get the second chance that so many families in so many wars had prayed for and never received. That was worth 2 bullets. That was worth everything. They helicoptered back to FOB Atlas at midnight. The Black Hawk settled onto the landing pad with the gentleness of a bird finding its nest. Ren expected to proceed directly to debriefing, expected the cold fluorescent lights and the metal chairs and the careful questions about shot placement and decision-making and rules of engagement. Instead, as she stepped off the Black Hawk into the warm Afghan night, the rotor wash still beating against her uniform, she saw them, the entire base personnel. Hundreds of soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen standing in formation on the landing pad. Silent. At attention. Uniforms pressed despite the hour. Weapons cleaned despite the dust. Boots polished despite the gravel. The formation of warriors honoring one of their own in the oldest tradition of military service. A tradition that predated nations and flags and the politics that started wars. The simple, powerful act of standing up and being present when someone had done something extraordinary. Colonel Marcus Stone stood at the front, his silver hair catching the floodlights, his face carrying an expression Ren had never seen on a commanding officer. Something deeper than pride or relief. The face of a man who had spent 60 years in a world of limits and had just watched someone transcend them. Attention to orders, Stone called. His voice carried across the formation and the flight line and the darkness beyond. Every person on the base snapped to a sharper attention. Staff Sergeant Ren Holloway Stone said, "Today you conducted a precision strike operation at a range of 4,087 meters. You engaged and eliminated a high-value target responsible for 63 American deaths and the training of insurgent snipers who killed hundreds more. You simultaneously rescued an American prisoner of war under active threat of execution, and you prevented a planned attack on Kandahar airfield that would have killed an estimated 200 coalition personnel." He paused. Let the silence carry the weight of those facts across the formation. Your shots today represent the longest confirmed combat kills in military history. Your actions represent the highest ideals of American military service. You are a credit to your uniform, your branch, and your nation. The formation erupted. Not polite applause. The raw, full-throated roar of warriors who understood exactly what had been accomplished and exactly what it had cost. The sound bounced off buildings and vehicles and the mountains beyond. The sound of hundreds of hardened combat veterans giving voice to something that transcended rank and service branch, and all the petty divisions that sometimes separated people who wore the same flag on their shoulders. Ren stood in the center of it, overwhelmed in a way that combat had never overwhelmed her. She had expected classification, secrecy, another sanitized record, and another buried achievement. Instead, she was standing in floodlight, surrounded by recognition from people who understood. Bryce Whitford broke through the formation. Running. Not the swagger he had carried into the armory that first morning. Not the performance of toughness that young soldiers use to armor themselves against vulnerability. Just a young man with tears streaming down his face and something in his eyes that looked like the beginning of wisdom. "You saved my brother," Bryce said, his voice cracking on every word. "After everything I said to you, after I doubted you and disrespected you, After I stood in that armory and told you to leave the long-range work to the boys, you went out there and made the most impossible shots in the history of warfare, and you saved my brother's life." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I just talked to Connor on the radio," Bryce continued. "He is awake. He is talking. He told me that he saw the chain explode and he did not understand what was happening. Did not know if it was God or luck or something else entirely. He just ran. And now the doctors say he is going to make it. He is going to come home." Ren nodded. Simple. Direct. The way her father would have received such words. With grace, but without theater. "I want to put in for the transfer," Bryce said. "I want to be your spotter. I want to learn from the best, if you will have me." Ren looked at Dominic, standing at the edge of the crowd, his weathered face carrying a smile she had not seen before. The smile of a man who had kept a promise to a dead friend and found that the keeping of it had healed something in himself. "Being a spotter is not about ego," Ren said to Bryce. "It is about service, making the shooter better, putting the mission above yourself." "Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am," Bryce said. "I can. I will." The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Stone walked Ren through every detail. When it was done, he pulled her aside. "The CIA is not pleased," Stone said. "They wanted Kazan alive. They are already pushing complaints up the chain." Ren felt the old fear. The same fear from when she had killed the Falcon. Would she be punished again? Buried again? Stone saw it in her face. "Relax, Staff Sergeant. I told them that battlefield conditions required lethal force, that attempting to wound at 4,000 meters would have compromised the prisoner rescue and the overall mission. They cannot argue with results. 200 people are alive at Kandahar because of your decision. The counterintelligence team has also identified and detained the individual who was leaking base information. A contracted interpreter with access to facility documents. That threat is neutralized." "So my record," Ren began, "will remain classified for approximately 20 years, Stone said. "Standard protocol for sensitive operations. After that, it will be declassified. Your name will enter the history books." Ren thought about that. 20 years. She would be 47. "I can live with that," she said. "There is one more thing," Stone said. "I have been authorized to offer you a training assignment. Advanced Scout Sniper School. You would be an instructor, teaching the next generation of long-range shooters. Passing on your father's legacy. Interested?" Ren thought about it. No more combat deployments. No more impossible shots. No more lying on mountains waiting to kill people at distances they could not imagine. Instead, teaching, mentoring, creating new generations of precision shooters who would protect Americans the way she had. Her father had been an instructor, had taught hundreds of Marines, had shaped careers and saved lives through the knowledge he shared. Maybe it was time for Ren to do the same. "Yes, sir," she said. "I am very interested." 3 years passed. Ren trained 216 students at Advanced Scout Sniper School, watched them graduate, watched them deploy, watched some of them come home in flag-draped coffins that she helped carry across tarmacs in the gray light of military airfields, watched others come home with missing limbs and haunted eyes, and the slow recognition that the person they had been before deployment no longer existed, and watched still others come home carrying stories of shots made and lives saved, and impossible problems solved at distances that their teachers would have said were impossible until a woman named Ren Holloway proved otherwise. She taught them everything her father had taught her. Not just the mechanics of shooting, not just the mathematics of ballistics or the physics of wind and gravity and atmospheric pressure. She taught them the philosophy, the discipline, the understanding that a sniper's most important skill was not marksmanship, but judgment, that the shot you chose not to take was sometimes more important than the one you did, that every trigger pull carried consequences that would follow you for the rest of your life, and that the only way to carry that weight was to be certain, absolutely certain, that the pull was justified before your finger moved. Bryce Whitford became her best spotter, worked beside her for 2 years before deploying as a sniper in his own right. He credited Ren with saving not just his brother's life, but his own soul, teaching him that redemption came through service, not through ego, that the distance between arrogance and competence was measured in humility, and that the strongest thing a person could do was admit what they did not know and learn from someone who did. On their final mission together, Bryce spotted a 2,800-meter shot that saved a pinned reconnaissance team. As they extracted, he turned to Ren. Connor is getting married next month, he said, his voice carrying the particular quality of a man who understands that he is living in time that might not have existed. He asked me to be his best man. I get to stand beside my brother in a church in Tulsa and watch him marry the woman he loves. I get to hold my niece when she is born. I get to be an uncle. I get all of that because you chose to shoot a chain instead of a man. Because you chose the harder shot. The one that could save a life instead of just taking one. He paused. Thank you does not cover it, but thank you. Ren understood then that the longest shot was not the one at 4,087 meters. It was choosing to save Connor when every manual and every doctrine and every calculation of probability said to prioritize Kazan. That choice had rippled outward through time. Saved a marriage that had not happened yet. Future children who would grow up with their father. A family made whole because one woman on a mountain had decided that a single life in front of her mattered as much as 200 lives she could not see. That was the shot that mattered most, and it would never appear in any record or any history book or any classified file. It would live only in the Whitford family, passed down through generations, as the story of how their lives began again on a day in August when a ghost reached across the impossible and chose mercy alongside justice. Dominic Hale retired at 58. 30 years of service complete. 3 decades of training warriors and burying friends and carrying promises made to the dead. He recommended Ren as his replacement for advanced training operations. The recommendation was approved unanimously. At 30, Ren Holloway became the youngest master instructor in Scout Sniper School history. She retired from active duty at 35 with 63 confirmed kills across 4 deployments. She never spoke about the numbers. When journalists tried to interview her about the 4,000-meter shots, she declined. Those shots were not about me, she would say. They were about the people I was trying to protect. Making it about me dishonors their sacrifice. She founded a civilian marksmanship program. Teaching veterans. Teaching law enforcement. Teaching responsible citizens the discipline and precision her father had taught her on a ranch in Texas when the world was simple and the future was unlimited. On the 10th anniversary of her father's death, Ren visited Arlington National Cemetery. She placed white lilies on the grave of Gunnery Sergeant Robert Holloway, his favorite flowers. She stood there in the summer heat and let the silence speak. A shadow fell across the headstone. Ren looked up to see an older woman, white hair, kind eyes, a gold star pin on her lapel, the symbol worn by mothers who had given their children to the service of their country. "Are you Ren Holloway?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am. My son was stationed at Kandahar Airfield. August 17, 2011. The day they say an attack was prevented. The day someone killed a man from over 2 miles away and saved hundreds of lives that nobody outside the military will ever know were in danger." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My son is alive because of that day. He came home, married his high school sweetheart, gave me 2 grandchildren who I get to watch grow up. All because someone I was never supposed to know about did something that was never supposed to be possible." Ren felt her own tears building. "I know it was you," the woman said gently. "I have spent years researching, talking to people, following threads that the military tried to bury. I know your record is classified. I know you cannot confirm it, but I needed to find you. Needed to look you in the eyes and tell you that my son's life mattered, that your shots mattered, that you gave our family a future we would not have had without you." She reached out and pulled Ren into an embrace. Tight. The hug that only mothers know how to give. When the woman left walking slowly between the white headstones, Ren knelt beside her father's grave. She placed her hand on the cold marble, felt the carved letters beneath her fingers. "I kept my promise, Dad," she whispered. "I became the sniper you trained me to be. Not for revenge, not for glory, for the people, for the families, for the daughters who will never know how close they came to standing where I am standing now." The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of summer grass and distant rain. She stood, straightened her shoulders, looked one last time at the headstone. Gunnery Sergeant Robert Holloway. Beloved father, devoted Marine. He taught others to aim higher. Ren walked away through the rows of white stone, past the graves of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines who had given everything for a country that would never know most of their names. She walked toward the parking lot, toward her car, toward the rest of her life. A life built on the foundation her father had laid. A life measured not in kills or records or impossible distances, but in lives saved and futures protected, and lessons passed forward to a new generation of warriors who would carry them into whatever wars waited beyond the horizon. A ghost who protected the living, a warrior who chose justice over vengeance, a daughter who honored her father not by avenging his death, but by continuing his work. And by that measure, Ren Holloway's longest shot was still traveling, still reaching across distances that could not be measured in meters, still finding its mark in the lives of people she would never meet and the futures she would never see. Invisible, impossible, immortal.